Okay, we're live. Yep, right, we're live. Edward, if you would like to introduce yourself, please.
Yes, I'm Ed. I'm currently a university student studying law, and we're here today to talk about, well, Stephen Crowder and his recent, well, not recent at all, but Socialism is Evil video. So, Will, yourself?
Indeed, quite the tongue twister there. I'm a financial analyst. I work in London. I'm an ex-Bristol student. Yes, generally have an interest
Kicked
in the
out.
topic. Oh, yeah, kicked out
Yeah,
as
of
per,
course. As
as
per.
per. Um,
Um,
so
I would
straight
like
away
to
before the video, I'd
go
like to
on.
start you little shit. Is without looking at the video, just the statement itself, socialism is evil. What are your thoughts on that? Without any comments
Well,
towards the video.
I mean, the video does define it, and of course, it talks about socialism as being the redistribution of wealth and income and seizing the means of production and all that leftist stuff, and evil obviously being, as direct quote, morally reprehensible or just effectively wrong, to put it simply. um it's a hard thing. Obviously, it's quite a blanket statement, really,
Hmm.
considering that socialism can be cast in many different lights across the political board. So that's why, first of all, and of course we haven't discussed this before, even remotely, before starting this podcast, I just wanted to say that I was actually very much against Stephen Crowder in this debate.
I,
I
s-
didn't think he argued very well.
I
And
feel like you're getting into the video, and I said without mentioning
sorry,
the video.
okay,
Well,
go on.
first of all, I'm quite pro-right. I lean very right anyway in my political views on many things. I do lean left on a few, I guess, topics. But as a blanket statement, socialism is evil. I disagree completely with that statement. For me,
Oh,
socialism
right,
is a
okay.
distribution of resources or uh,
Wealth,
or
income.
wealth. That's part of my definition. I think it's resources is the word I prefer to use because it
Okay.
encompasses things like food, yes, income, food, shelter, housing, water, everything that's sort of within
Right.
a market of any kind that any someone
Because
ends. I'd like to use the word resources
yeah,
and the redistribution of that. But even if we want to just specifically touch on wealth, I don't think that is evil. That's
well,
not fundamentally evil.
yeah.
But I will
Hold
acknowledge
on.
that there are other things that are that you may
Let's go
believe are
down to the
moral, but
nitty
they're
gritty.
bad. But I don't believe this is one of them. There are lots of things where you think you're doing
Okay.
good, but it's bad in the end. I genuinely don't believe socialism is one of the things. I don't think it's evil. The redistribution of income as a fundamental philosophy
Full
is not
stop.
evil.
Full
Full
stop,
stop.
Will.
Full stop. Sorry.
Okay, full stop. I was actually quite surprised by that because I expected you to actually be siding more with Stephen Crowder, and that's why I said
Well,
I thought
again,
you were
I'm not on the
getting
video yet.
surprised about.
Haven't watched the video yet.
Yeah, very true. But you clearly have. So anyway,
Yeah.
so um, I actually I hadn't seen much of him beforehand, but I've only seen, of course, the first interview
I personally have only
or
seen one or two
debate.
of his other videos.
And I must say, as someone who also, isn't really leftist, not even by English standards, really.
So
Um,
center.
yeah, so centre basically, yeah. At least from an American point of view. Um, I was actually, of course, my preconceived idea, I thought socialism is evil. I thought, well, a bit of a blanket statement, but I'm sure, of course, he just wants to bring people in. I thought Stephen Crowder would have a good argument and be fairly. I mean, there's reasonable points to make, but yet he actually did a terrible job, in my opinion, of first of all holding up that side, but also dealing with the other person. I thought,
Okay, sorry. Just to
if
be clear, we're only going to talk about
sorry,
person number one, yeah? Because you
person
didn't.
number one being the guy with the black
No, no, but
hoodie,
no,
not
no.
this
I'm
kind
just
of
yeah,
arty
absolutely.
farty guy in the red
Yeah, no. I'm
jumper.
saying
But
we're only gonna discuss him because you haven't seen the other guy
yes,
yet. Okay, that's fine.
yes,
Yeah,
yeah,
yeah.
yeah, of
Carry on,
course.
carry on.
And so,
Well,
what I would like to go
well,
on, actually,
before you rant, I'd like to comment as well. I unfortunately share the exact same view. I think his behaviour throughout the interview, or discussion, or debate, or argument was reprehensible. I think it was very
yeah,
disgusting. He is
evil.
he's a celebrity. He's very well known. Yeah, use the word evil. I mean, he's a celebrity. He's well known. People know who
I'm
he is.
joking.
Also, the setup is terrible in this instance, insofar as it's a surprise topic, as they announced in the video. Like, no one knew they were going to be talking about socialism today. He turns up with a giant folder of information, and then he
And
goes,
well, first,
no, please. And then
oh
you've
yeah,
got
go on.
a crowd that follow him already. They're the only people that know he's doing a talk, but they don't know the topic. Everyone that knows him is particularly right wing anyway, because that's what his past videos are about. So he's collected a bunch of right wing people, then gone, aha, talk to me about socialism, and I'm going to record it and then show off how I can debunk socialism. It's like, well,
If
you've got a
yeah,
crowd of 100 right wing people who then 3 people put up their hand to talk about it because none of them are left wing anyway. Then he has horrendous behaviour, and he touches on good things, sure, but he is completely prepared for an argument to a right wing crowd where no one else is prepared. So at the face of it, that's just like, well, what kind of productive conversation are you going to have?
well, the whole this is the thing though. This is what surprises me, makes me laugh the most about this, is the guy who turns up with a folder, knowing what the question is, already having very very strong mind and had prepared for this debate beforehand. Well, I would have thought he should
Yeah,
have
yeah,
done,
I'm with you. Yeah,
considering that he's the one who's prepping it. And I'm not the one about, again, as he does state, scoring points. Whatever his name is, Stephen. But the guy on the right just completely schools him. He's cool, collective, gives genuinely good points, answers the questions, and doesn't rise to it. Of course, he makes some slip ups, and we'll get on to it really about
yeah. I mean, he's
what
unprepared
Stephen
though, isn't he?
criticised
He's
this.
he's
But but I think the
he's also
preparation,
very
even if it means,
uncharismatic as well. I think that's really important. That Stephen is a crowd pleaser, and the
he is,
interviewer
yeah,
is a complete. There's no there's
interviewee.
interviewee. So yeah, you're right. There's no charisma coming out from him. He's just sat there, bleak body language, which is what you could consider calm and appropriate. And I'm not going to get too eccentric, but insofar as it's not very. Again, I just want to use the
If
word
you
charismatic. It's not very like, oh wow, it's not inspiring in any way. He just sort of sits
no,
very calm, which I think is appropriate. But you have
if
to be
you
because Stephen is so eccentric
Of
in a
course.
negative
Well,
way.
eccentric is, yeah, a bit of a okay, yeah, we'll
I'll
call it
stay with it. I'll
eccentric.
stay with
But
eccentric. I stand by that.
I think the thing is with me, if we analyze the body language, we can clearly see him at one point when
Oh,
Stephen actually
I've made
becomes
notes,
quite
mate.
irate.
If you
He
I've
leans
made notes.
forward and he's when he becomes
Yeah,
very
no.
irate,
If
he's
you actually
leaning
want to
forward in
fast
the guy's
forward,
face, continues talking. Kind of, if you tell me the point of time which we think he's, I think it's about 8:23:03 is when you can see that he's right like up against him, and he's like he's stuttering and he's trying to make a point, and the other guy there is kind of just very uh, he's doing a very great job of handling the situation. Now, I know we need to be talking about the actual debate itself and
we'll
analyzing
get
the
to that. We'll
points that
get
they
to that.
make, but again, I just want to point out the difference in and the way that he approaches this debate. Again, like for instance, the one point that I remember him saying is like, you can make eye contact with me, and then follows up with something else. But it doesn't matter the reason why he says you need to make eye contact with me. The fact that Stevens pointed that out about the guy, we have no idea about the other person um and his mental, whatever it is, mental state. Some people don't like to look people in the eye, and some people of course take this as, oh no, it's poor manners or not being like approachable, whatever it is. But genuinely, there are people out there who struggle with making good eye contact, and that's nothing against them. It's just more to do with their
Yeah, yeah,
whatever
for
it
sure,
is.
for sure, for sure.
But I mean, the dude could be on the spectrum for all I know, and that's no offense to the guy, but again, the fact that Stephen pointed it out, I just think it's a scummy thing to do. Really, it's not. It was not necessary to the debate. It was no reason to bring it up. Again, the guy just he just showed himself up even more by kind of bringing up these like just stupid points. Really.
Yeah, and
Um,
if I could take over from that because I just want to echo some of the things. My the clip I did is at 22 minutes 39. He leans right over, he places his hand on the desk, and then when he want to beat his point, he like repeats it. You said this, so therefore you mean that. He taps the table with every
oh, of
syllabus.
course,
He goes,
the
so you said this, yeah? And I'm just like, you're like, and I've paused the frame that you can't see on the video here, Ed, at 22 minutes 39, and he's leaning
yeah,
right across, and it's just
yeah, yeah,
bro, calm down. And it's
and
one of those things where it's a crowd pleaser,
of course, and he did a
and
classic
as for
Kathy
the
Newman
jibe,
as well. If you go, sorry to cut you off there, but he did a classic Kathy, what's her name, Catherine Newman
yeah, yeah,
or
that's the
Kathy
name.
Newman, where he goes, oh, but So this is what you mean by this, and it's just like, no, 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 no. He's just putting words in the guy's mouth and
It's
not allowing him
interesting.
to
It's
actually answer the
interesting you pick that
question.
up because he does that later on, where some guy goes, "Well, the Conservatives think this," and then he goes, "Whoa, whoa, see, you're just saying I'm conservative and I think this. That's I
Yeah,
don't think
yeah,
he references Cathy Newman, but he just said you're putting words in my mouth, and and in my head I was like, well, Stephen, didn't just now you say that leftists think blah blah blah, and I'm
yeah.
like, well,
Let's not
you
forget the
know.
guy's holding the microphone. I mean, that's
Yeah, I
clearly
mean,
like
I do
the
get that. And the thing is, someone like this, I'm gonna skip on a little bit of a tangent. That this guy is a verified Twitch performer or producer of videos. The fact that he comes around and he has one microphone, he's doing a guest host entertainment video and he has one
yeah.
microphone.
Well, he's got two GoPros. You think you can bring two microphones for God's
Absolutely.
sake, like,
And
or
what
at
was
least
and
make let the other guy hold it for
yeah, no, oh, this is you
you
missed.
know.
You didn't see the second guy. Okay, when the second guy sat down and he went to speak. Sorry, third guy even. Stephen pointed the microphone and he went to hold it just to like look as if he was tilting it towards more of his mouth. And he goes, "Oh, classic student, get your hands off. Oh, what do you think you are? Like, oh, my microphone, my microphone." It did like a mimicky voice,
Yeah.
and it's just like,
And
oh,
don't get me wrong. At
and I
the
was
end
just
of the
like,
day,
well, all right, mate. Like, I don't know. It was just really unneeded banter to get the crowd
there's
on his side. It was a
yes,
crowd-pleasing joke, one of many that he does.
yeah,
That
of
I'm
course
just
it is.
like, mate, come on.
There's a point in there actually when they're having a conversation and they're midpoint and he turns away to the audience instead of just answering the question. Just address something slightly different, which I actually unfortunately can't reference, but we can go back through and reference it
Yeah,
later. But I'd just like to point out as well, it is the guy's own setup. He can do with it as he pleases. But if you want to have a decent debate, there's a couple of key points that you shouldn't be doing. At the end of the debate, he brings up points from his little special folder and says, "Oh, look what I wrote down here: Germany, Sweden, and France." Like, what's your point? That you happen to have researched the topic beforehand and that you might know what they might say? Of course, you're going to know what they say. This is, an age-old argument. Don't think that you're pioneering the ideas and concepts behind socialism, first of all. And of course, he did that after, which isn't a great idea for to hold a proper debate. That is, again, drawing on the autism, the is in and the way he
I'd
used
like to
it.
talk quite a
We'll
lot
get,
about
yeah.
that autism bit, by the way. I'd like to talk quite a lot about that.
Should we talk about it now or?
No,
Yeah,
we'll skip it.
okay,
Let's
okay.
get more
Well,
into the content of socialism a little bit, and then we'll
okay.
come back to that. I think.
So I think the best way to start, and it's the guy's main point, which he actually takes a while to get around to saying, is that again, quote unquote, the redistribution you have not earned is immoral, something along those lines, actually, of like money you haven't earned is immoral.
Hmm.
That's a a reasonable point to make, definitely, because at the end of the day, you've got loads of things about that. If someone's earned something, they have a right to keep all of it. However, in a system where you have a government, you need to have some form of tax. Um, and if you have some form of tax, you have a form of socialism. And of course, you've got all the things and the good things that they have behind having a government, which is, publicly funded things that
Police
we need:
force, maybe.
police force,
NHS if you're
army,
British.
roads, NHS if you're British. Now, of
Roads is
course,
a big one.
this is a debatable one about NHS because, of course,
Yeah,
I
yeah. I know.
mean,
Again, absolutely.
we actually, I tell you what, we'll start with this. So, bit of a tangent first of all, but NHS, of course, is quite, it is literally a national point for England. It's
And
something.
I'm very blindly in favour of it because I know that it's like a shining example for the world that everyone does applaud our NHS, um, and I'm very blindly in
mm,
favour of it. I must admit, even if it's a
Not
bleeding
everyone
sinkhole of
does.
money, I understand that everyone does, and I understand that if it's like a sinkhole of money where you like it just bleeds and bleeds and bleeds, but
Yeah.
I like the fact that absolutely anyone who is that pretty much holds a British passport, no matter what, can get medical attention at zero cost whenever they need it. And
Yeah.
I like that. Now, no,
Well,
well, but before I let you go on, I can imagine that if I pay solely, if that doesn't exist, and I don't pay taxes to pay for that, and I might therefore be able to afford private insurance and get better care, and then the system could look after itself. I'm open to that discussion, that ideas. I'd love to see the numbers on it,
yeah.
but as sort of a blanket socialist statement, coming from a right winger, I like the idea of a redistribution of wealth to make sure that everyone gets free medical care. I'm
Yes.
totally down for that personally.
Well, I think I would prefer to see some more privatization than we've already seen. Of course, we've got the privatization of dentistry, but I'd prefer to see the UK go down more down the Scandinavian route, because at the end of the day, the figures show that the NHS doesn't perform as well in terms of saving people's lives compared to these other systems. So at the end of the day, I'm all about the overall welfare gain for the populace. So I would like to see some more privatization, or at least more competition within the hospital doctors and whatnot, and therefore drive down prices and improve the spending by encouraging consumers to obviously spend money if they've got it in order to
Yeah,
improve
that's a
the
big
care
one.
that they
That's a
can
big one.
get.
Those that can afford it should be using it, and they don't. Even people like me, I've had private medical insurance since birth, but I
All right,
often
no
go, I
need to
often
brag.
no,
Sorry,
I
go on.
often well, come on, middle
I'm
class.
joking.
What do you expect?
Yeah,
But I do go to A&E for things. I go to an NHS A&E.
of course. Yeah.
But
What the worry is, like, if you're lying there bleeding out of your face, you shouldn't have to then worry about the rest of your life being indebted to a hospital because you haven't got the proper insurance policy that covered, a hole in your face type thing. Of course, that's an extreme example, but it does happen. People
yeah, for sure, I can see that.
don't get covered by something ridiculous. They've got a broken leg. You can blame them for not having the correct insurance policies, but at the end of the day, people are getting screwed over, and that is a fact. And not everyone has the ability to look into this type of stuff. Um, but yes, sorry. So bringing ourselves more back to the
Yeah, we were a
point.
bit on a tangent there. Yeah.
Um, at the end of the day, our healthcare, we choose to see that as a national interest, and therefore we put funding into it. And is it immoral, therefore, to take some money away from people in order? When I say some money, I mean every taxpayer, which is the majority of income earners, into it. Well, at the end of the day, he's saying it's evil. Um, that's an objective statement, and well, clearly it's not evil, because there's lots of people that think it's actually a very good thing. Because at the end of the day, um, you are funding a system that also benefits yourself as well. It's not being taken away and given to a terrorist group or anything that isn't in your own favor the majority of the time.
Yeah, and
And
if
of
I could
course,
tie that specifically to the video, I believe he mentions police force and roads. I know. I'm sorry. I know. I do very much know we're talking about sort of public
no,
funded
let's move on to
healthcare.
this. Go on.
Well, at this point, where he mentions police and roads, but he doesn't. He acknowledged that that was a good thing. That should be sort of publicly
It's
funded.
police and healthcare, but
Did
and
did did he,
army. Yeah.
did he say that he wanted healthcare to be publicly
Okay.
funded?
So no, it was this. So this is again another point we can go into. Um,
No, what I'm trying to
the
say is,
guy.
Stephen, or doesn't really iron out the line in the
Yes,
sand of taxes where he
I would.
stands between this should be publicly funded, but that shouldn't be. He doesn't draw that line. So he believes in a very small amount of tax, I believe, I can infer, and that should fund roads, police, and military. But
Well,
like
again,
sort of nothing else. No,
it's.
what I'm saying is Stephen didn't solidify his view and then let the guy maybe argue around that. He didn't do
I
that.
think,
Stephen didn't do that.
yeah,
That's
of
all
course.
I'm saying. Stephen didn't do that. He didn't draw his line in the sand and let the guy say, "Well, that's your line. This is my line." He didn't do that, which I would have
I
liked to
think,
see.
I think what, yeah. Well, at the end of the day, though, if Stephen had drew the line, as you say, the issue is that even if he does support a national funded army, that is still a form of socialism. Because, and as the guy rightly said, the guest,
Yep.
you can't just willy nilly say this and I can't remember. So okay, let's take it two steps back to what they're originally talking about. Um, the guest said that at the end of the day, you pay into the police force and you pay into the army. That's a form of
Yep.
socialism. Do
Yep.
you support that? And he said, well, no, actually, at the end of the day, you've got to just draw the distinction between a commodity and a uh, public good.
Public good.
And he
Yep.
was saying that that the healthcare is a public good. And of course, the definition of a public good for people that don't know is, and as they state, is non-rivalry and non-excludable. So that means that you can't distinguish between the people using it in order to enforce some people to pay, and others, of course, that wouldn't be obliged to pay. And then non-rivalry. Um, means that I can't remember. It's like the more people that use it, it isn't contested as much. So the more people that use the healthcare, it becomes more contested. The more people that use the army, well, there is everyone can use the army in Britain. It's not contested, and likewise with the police force. But again, that it doesn't quite fit. I'll actually
I
double
understand
check.
that.
Um, Rivalrous. Let's have a look. As a good consider. A good is considered non-rivalrous or non-rival if, for any level of production, the cost of providing it to a marginal additional individual is zero. Okay, sorry. Um, I was pretty much wrong, but somewhat, well, not far off, I guess. Um, so effectively, if someone moves into the UK, it doesn't cost any more to provide the service of the army to people. But again, this is all very debatable at the end of the day. The more people that move into the UK, um, the more police force that you need or whatever. But of course, the one difficulty with police is that it's non-excludable. Again, we have the same type of thing with roads. Of course, that's why it's called a quasi. What's it called again? Quasi public good, because of course it
Yeah.
is somewhat excludable because we have things like the M6 toll, at least in the UK, or bridges with tolls. Anything you have to pay for means you can exclude it, but it's just normally very, very difficult to do. Um, and again, well, police force, you can have private securities and whatnot. Again, it is very much a grey zone. But I think the issue I genuinely, or generally, sorry, I should say, have with Stephen is that he states something in order to state something that isn't necessarily true in order to just um, prove his narrative. Him saying that just because it's difficult to exclude or that it is somewhat non-rivalry means that that part of socialism is acceptable and therefore I'm going to exclude that from socialism. It just doesn't make sense. It is still a form of socialism regardless of whether or not you have the option to exclude people or not. And I think that is a logical flaw in one of his statements that he was making, and that's my opinion about that.
Interesting, interesting. And I think I share that. I think I share that pretty wholly. Um, and that, now I'm referencing directly to the video. I did find that clip that I'm talking about. And unfortunately, I do want to get into the nitty gritty, but it's actually something that's very bad that Stephen does, and I have to sort of call him out on it. So that police sort of the socialized funding of a military, police, roads, education, things like that.
Hmm.
I found the clip. And so basically, it goes as Stephen says, we're defining it. Okay, the collective means of seizing, distribution, production is immoral. And then the other guy goes, well, I think that's absurd because if you say it's immoral, then you have to say that the government funding of police is immoral, and the military also,
Yes,
and that's ridiculous. You have to have some state that's going to socialise. So the question is, how not do you have it, but how much? This is
exactly.
the guy saying
Brilliant.
it's going to happen. The question is how much. That's our argument here. And then this is what Stephen does would absolutely hate. Okay, I mean, he's very clever because I didn't notice it when he first did it. So that's what Yusuf said. He said, look, we're going to have some form, but the question is how much, and that's what we're going to discuss. Then Stephen goes, okay, this is what you're trying to get me to do. You're going to try and get me to concede ground. And he goes, yeah. And then he goes, all right, well, let's say you're going to try and argue that the government is needed to fund these things. Why would I say that? And Yusuf goes, well, because if you don't say that, then you have to
Oh,
concede. He said, well, if
it's
you don't say that, you have to concede,
brilliant. Absolutely
then
brilliant.
you have to concede ground. And he goes, okay, well, you're sort of comparing this to he puts the words in his mouth. You're sort of comparing this to a Denmark Scandinavian social
Oh,
democracy because they have a really good safety net of welfare, blah 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 blah. And
oh, don't get me
then they
started.
start talking about
Yeah.
Scandinavia, and I'm just like, you see, again, he didn't draw his line in the sand. The guy
No,
said, you need to concede ground, you need to declare what amount of socialism in order to fund your military and police and education is acceptable. And Stephen didn't. He just goes, well, I think you would prefer Scandinavia. And the guy goes, okay, yeah, I do. And then And then we all know what he does about Scandinavia. Absolutely
Yeah.
reprehensible. Watch it again. It starts at 14 minutes. It's terrible.
Yeah, I would actually take a look at it. I think the one thing we
Yeah,
can draw from that
disgusting.
is, again, it was just a shitty tactic in order to dodge the point. He literally answered him perfectly. It's like he didn't fall into the pit trap of whatever Stephen wanted him to say. He actually just said, well, actually, you're gonna have to concede ground. Just left it at that, and then the guy was like, well, actually, oh crap, he didn't know, he couldn't follow up, so he just changed topic, or
Well, he
brought it on
wheedled it
to
in,
Scandinavia. Yeah, he does.
which is quite shrill of him, which is interesting
Yeah.
because Stephen didn't like the use of the word shrill later in the argument.
I thought it was shill, wasn't it? Shill or shrill, yeah. I think.
Shield, no, Shield, you're right. No R, it's Shield.
Yeah.
Shill.
So
Yeah, so I
that
know I would
was.
agree. The question is
Yeah.
how much. Like, it has to exist, period.
Yeah.
Um, for certain public goods such as military,
Perhaps.
police. I actually watched a video the other day where a lot of pro gun Second Amendment people were like, "We don't need a police force. Give every single person in America a gun. I guarantee you'll never need the police." Because
Well,
people would just
of
be in,
course,
because
which is
people would be
stupid,
in
but
fear of being shot, for example. And I thought it was interesting to listen to and talk about it. But I
well,
think you need it. I
that's
think
a
no. I think you
narco.
need no. I
That's
think
a
you need it.
narco capitalism, really.
Yeah, I know. You need it. You need a public disciplinary system for sure,
I think
such as the police.
the. I think at the end of the day, though, I think every single system should be reflective of the context of the time, or
Context.
zeitgeist, or the period of the time, whatever you want to call it. But the idea that it should reflect the views and values of the people there, and the technology that we have to support it. Of course, you couldn't have a capitalist system a capitalist right wing system in a tribal, like rundown area with no form of technology or communication, because it just wouldn't work. My point is, I think the people that are always like super far this or super far that, again, this is just a general point of view. It's again, like you said, it's an ideology. The point being that it's more hypothetical and something to work towards as we progress as a nation, rather than an actual realistic idea. I think the guy on the right is unbelievably good at keeping everything very grounded and realistic and saying, well, look, actually, we need these things. This is a form of socialism. Socialism doesn't have to be attached to super left wing. And as he says, you're thinking it as Venezuelan or Soviet Union kind of sees the means of production. Everyone paid £10 equally across the board, friendship
Yeah.
from this. That isn't what it is at all. That might be like, sorry, completely under communism. Of course, socialism plays its part, but it doesn't represent. It doesn't represent in whole that at
Yeah,
all.
he keeps dealing with absolutes as if
Of
that's
course,
oh god, we're getting onto the autism thing because that's what my brain draws to. Before
yeah.
we touch on that, because I'm happy to go back to
Okay.
Stephen and his absolutes, but very very at the beginning we missed out that the Joseph, the interviewee, the other guy on the right,
Oh, sorry,
he
Joseph. Yeah.
he starts off with universal basic income. That's how they start the argument,
Yes.
and that's obviously to declare that we're going to redistribute wealth insofar as universal basic income, um, sort of, and then pro and cons. Now, in my view, that to me isn't really the same as taxing. I don't believe you in my country in Britain here that we take income from tax and we
Uh,
distribute it, and that's no, let me go with this,
that
and
is. Yeah.
that's how we create minimum wage. Like, no, it's just the government says you have to pay workers at least this amount. It's not a we're going to tax and then pay the difference. You know what I mean? Like, it's not really taxing and taking money and then the government redistributing it. It's saying no. Hey, look, you as companies within my country, this is the minimum amount you are required to be paying your workers, and I think that's different. And I think could they have that across the board in the US? Do they have a minimum wage? Yeah, and I don't think it's particularly left wing. I mean, maybe it's left leaning, but it's not. It's not. That to me isn't a redistribution of wealth, an enforced redistribution of wealth. It's a I don't know. Maybe it's some form of it, but it's different to
It's.
taxing and giving out money. It's just saying, you've got to be a decent human being. This is the minimum you're allowed to pay your workers. There's a difference.
I think at the end of the day, sorry to.
No, I'm pretty
I
much
get
done.
that.
I'm pretty much done.
I get. There's a difference. Minimum wage definitely has a different result, and no, it definitely has different effects, of course. but one of the results, most definitely, is a redistribution of income. Because at the end
Yeah,
of the
but my
day,
point is,
it's
it's
taking
not
money out the
enforced. It's not
pockets of
enforced, but it's not
companies.
distributed by the government itself, and it's not
That's true. That is
enforced.
true. Yes,
That's what I mean. That
but
it's different. But
yes,
yeah,
of
no,
course,
no, absolutely, it redistributes the wealth from
it's
up the
still
chain to down the chain for sure.
it's still a fiscal policy, and it's
Yes.
still the idea is to get money, like you said, down the chain so that more
Yep.
people
Yep.
can
Yep. Yep. Yep.
at the
Yep.
lower end can have more spending money. Blah 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 blah. Um,
Yep.
but I would like to draw on the way. What did you say his name was again?
Joseph. Joseph.
Yosef, the way he presents that argument right at the start, I thought was absolutely brilliant. He made a
Mm.
very good point. I mean, to be fair, again, I don't know the exacts behind this, and I'm sure some of it is wrong, and I would like to make a point against it. But he said, well, do you agree? I mean, first of all, again, Stephen, very poor form to, again, the way he dealt and answered this question. Do you agree with minimum wage? And he responds with, well, I'm not a fan of it. Well, what do you mean that you're not a fan? What does that mean? Does that mean that you are against it because it's a socialist policy? Or does it mean like you prefer if it wasn't around, but you accept it because actually it has good effects? I don't like, again, it's, I'm not a fan of it isn't a very good answer to the question because it doesn't give a very clear cut idea of what his point of view is on that matter. Not being a fan of it is very ambiguous, first of all. And well, the guy follows it with saying, well, actually, are you against legal immigration? And he goes, yeah, of course I'm against illegal immigration. Well, he says, well, actually, the minimum wage prevents immigration by stopping people coming in, taking lower wages. Sorry, I should say immigrants coming in and taking lower wages. And I was like, okay, that's that. He's literally just come straight off the bat with a very good point. And can we just quickly say that, in fact, he doesn't answer it? I need to double check to see exactly what he says, but from the gist of what I remember, he didn't answer the question. Or at least he didn't contend the point, I should say. And then further to that, I would like to, if I was going to bring some rebuttal to it, I would actually like to say that I'm sure a lot of illegal immigrants, because they don't have the papers, probably take a substantial amount of cash in hand, which goes unregistered, untaxed, and presumably under minimum wage. Um, that was a point I would like to bring against it. But again,
Yeah,
it
I
is
mean, I
what it
think we
is.
should have tried to highlight to Stephen was that um, without minimum wage, capitalists love it because they can get as close to slave labor costs as with it being legal, essentially. Um,
Let's not.
because
That's not the
immigrants
best way of
come in
phrasing.
being unskilled, you don't have to pay them as much. So they say, yeah, illegal immigration, somewhat good because that means I barely have to pay them sweet FA. And
They
so
get a
the
high.
caps,
They get a
yeah,
better margin. Of
yeah,
course, yeah.
absolutely a better margin. The caps absolutely love it. Um, absolutely love it.
But and of course, because it brings in more competition, which drives down the wages. And that's why the guy was saying if you bring up the minimum wage, you're going to be putting them away because they're not going to be paying. Companies aren't going to be paying immigrants $10 an hour, is what he said, or something
Yeah,
thereabouts.
yeah.
I don't know what the minimum wage is, but to continue on the idea again, so brilliant point that he made. Stephen doesn't contend it, or at least not very well. To go further to that, he then something he talks about, like the idea of successful socialism. He goes, you give me some examples, and he goes Denmark, Germany, France, Sweden,
That's
or
after,
something
by
like
the
that.
way, Stephen put those
Yes,
words
yeah.
in his mouth because he alluded to Scandinavia when the guy spoke about
Oh,
taxes. So
interesting.
he started that, but just to make that clear.
And that's also a very good point because, like I said, he brings them up at the end as if, like, he knew exactly what the guy was going to say. But I didn't realize if he put the words in his mouth
It's
anyway. Well,
there
there you go.
at 15 minutes. Sorry, 14 minutes. Take a look. Puts the words right in his mouth.
Let's have a look. 40 minutes exactly.
That's where the conversation starts, and he goes to, oh, okay, so you're referencing to this Denmark social democracy. Is that where you're getting at? That kind of, and that's what Stephen
Hold up.
says, and then Yusuf goes, okay, yeah, I guess I am. So yeah, it's disgusting. Um,
Yeah, so yeah, just again, very shady tactics, shall we say? But again, he says to him something
well,
about
it's
the
an absolute
minimum.
bait because every left winger
Yeah,
knows how left wing Scandinavia is, for example, and why wouldn't you reference it
yeah.
as a successful? Um,
Well, the points I'd like to bring up about that though, he goes, oh, do these countries have minimum wages? Well, actually, Germany and France do have minimum wages and are quite well. Germany, of course, especially very successful country. Again, that depends how you measure it, of course, but at least it's the biggest economy in Europe. Um, but the one thing I'd like to bring up was it Sweden or was it Denmark that he was saying about the minimum wage?
He touched on both. I think it was Denmark though. I could be
One
wrong.
of these, suppose. Okay, so Denmark does have a minimum wage. Presumably, it's Sweden then. Um, yes, right. So Sweden
The thing is,
doesn't, but
I
what
would
it does
find that
have.
hard to believe that the government doesn't say there is a minimum you have to be paying your workers. I find that very hard to believe. I know I don't have it in front of me, but I find that difficult to believe that Sweden does not say, you know what, you
Ah,
can't charge your worker £3 an hour. Like,
but but the reason why they don't have people paid $3 an hour is because they allow for trade unions, and the trade unions negotiate the wages. We have a similar thing in the UK, of course. We've got the rail trade unions that
yeah,
negotiate wages for the railway workers. Um, And the reason, of course, they do this is because, at least originally, I guess, the government used to run the rails, so they could dictate the wages that they paid them anyway. So it probably was, I don't
yeah,
know, I guess it stemmed from that.
yeah.
Um, but again, though, so yeah, of course, they end up, and that's is that a form of capitalism, trade unions? But it doesn't make sense to me because Margaret Thatcher, famously banned them or kicked them out, stopped them, and she was
Yeah.
quite right wing. But I'd call them a right wing idea because it's the idea of people coming together and forming a power to hold leverage over other powers, other companies that are employing. So if that's just at the end of the day because it's deregulated enough and got the systems in place to allow for
Yeah,
trade
well, I
unions,
mean,
and that's
overall, I
fine by
think it's
me.
bad because he alludes that, you know what, we don't have to be left wing, you don't need minimum wage. When it's like, well, you have a group of people and their sole purpose is to look
But it's
after their workers. That's left
yeah,
wing in itself because you're just sort of looking out for the little guy.
uh,
And that's how they discuss, and they wouldn't allow the wage to go that low.
I,
So to say that they don't have anything in place to protect the wage, it's misleading, and
I would need
it's
to
contentious
yeah
essentially. It's contentious
yes.
to say that they don't have a platform to ensure minimum wage because they have something, and it's just not called minimum wage. It's done by the trade unions.
At the end of the day, though, it's again, maybe this refers back to my point about it's got to reflect the social sphere at the time. You can't have some areas just wouldn't be able to support a trade union for whatever reasons.
Yep, yep.
Whether it is because people don't have the capacity to be able to do it,
Ah,
whether or not there isn't the number of people to be able to form one. There are so many areas that wouldn't be able to form a proper trade union. And there are some companies that are just far too big to form a trade union against.
oh,
So until
yeah,
we get to that point where companies eventually get more competitive and trade unions have the
yeah.
ability, or people have the ability to come together to form them, we are going to have to put something in place. And that is the national minimum wage. And that's again why it isn't evil. It's a placeholder, it's a foothold, it's a means to an end, and it's certainly not evil, really. Again, it may not be in some cases the most ideal for everyone at every point, but it definitely does a goddamn good job of stopping people getting paid
the
pennies.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. I mean, if it helps, at least if it helps the majority, and I say the majority when I mean actually 80%. If there's a policy that helps 80% of the populace and it does well, that you can't just say that's evil. You can't say it's immoral. I
Yeah,
think you know what I
yeah,
mean.
of
It's
course.
fair for the vast majority, so it works. And if you have something that helps 85% or 90, that's fine. But to say that it's evil, it's not. They have a system and it does well.
Yeah,
The
exactly.
other, like, if there's two ways you can look at what I'm about to say is that using Scandinavia as a shining example. The reason why is if you're pro-left and you say, "Hey, look at us, this is ideal," kind of thing. I don't think the direct comparison's there. I think for indigenous, homogenous, small countries that have resources to allow themselves to be self-sufficient, more. I mean, I'm literally just starting a new topic, by the way. I'm not linking this to
I'm
anything.
listening.
You good?
Yeah, so I
Oh,
said I was
okay.
listening. Carry
Oh,
on.
sorry. Okay, perfectly. I just think the idea of socialism works on small scales. If there is a country that is self-sufficient, they have farmland, decent weather, access to lots of sort of food, they can be more socialist than others. For example,
Of course, yeah.
so when people that are like in the US and go, hey, let's be like Scandinavia, not going to work. Straight up, like, bro, there's just so many different problems between what Scandinavia deals with day to day than what the fucking US deals with.
Like I said, it's the exact same.
And
It,
sorry for people like Stephen
sorry.
to say, oh, why don't you go? Why don't you try and be like them? And then bait them into saying, well, it won't work because that sounds weird. It's, well, you're a douchebag, bro. You can't compare Sweden, for example, to the United States of America. It's ridiculous.
Again, let's be serious here. At the end of the day, Scandinavia is the area of Scandinavia and the countries within it are more developed in a lot of cases than America. Like you said, they're smaller, so they
Yeah.
have that level of management available to them. People are happy to pay, funnily enough, into a government fund so that they can make the best decisions for them because presumably they have faith in the people that they elect in order
That's actually
to
something that's very interesting because
fund
I definitely believe
what the people
Scandinavian
need.
people trust their politicians a lot more than the US
And,
citizens
and it's
trust
not
their politicians,
yeah,
for
and
sure.
it's not like they pay taxes because they're blind to the idea of stepping up for themselves and claiming their taxes back and rising up against the government. Again, America's built off a different contextual area about rising up against the tyranny of government and you know
Britain.
always being skeptical against this type of stuff. Yeah, exactly. So that isn't what it's about for a lot of these other countries. They have faith in them being able to. Again, this is really tough speaking from England because we have some of the shittest roads in the whole world. But they have faith in their
You don't live in
government.
Surrey, mate. You don't know nothing.
Yeah, God. Well,
Honestly, mate, I can barely get my 4x4 out the drive with all these leaves.
but they have faith in their government to actually provide services that would otherwise be too difficult to provide by multiple companies or one monopoly. Because again, they just don't have the infrastructure, the resources, knowledge, the access to different departments, or a lot of the time the authority to be able to do something. Imagine trying to put HS2. Imagine if it was a private firm trying to put HS2 in with no government. It would quite literally be impossible.
Mm,
However, HS2 could be one of the best things for this country possible. And for the people that don't know, it's a super fast train that I think does it link Manchester to London and
yeah,
stops in
Manchester to
Birmingham.
London and London to Birmingham. So we would no longer just have like a giant business district that is London. We could have like seamless transportation between
Yeah,
two
at the moment,
major global trading cities.
yeah, which is
Uh,
exactly what we need, and that would be impossible because, of course, all the rights to land and not being able to build, a foot away from people's properties. Um, Again,
yeah,
it'd just be too difficult. But yeah, it's probably the best thing for the whole country. So
yeah.
yeah, it is just it's a tough one really, and it's not like I don't agree with the the, the property rights and whatnot, but I am in favour of the HS2 in most circumstances.
Um,
Um, so yeah, I
absolutely,
think
absolutely.
that's my opinion on the need for socialism in certain circumstances, the fact that it isn't evil, and often that the reason people think it is evil is because the context of the time and the reflection of values. America distrusts their government. They are unhappy with giving to other people, not because they're necessarily selfish, but because of the idea that
Well, it's
they are
ingrained. Self.
sovereign themselves, if you know what I mean.
Yeah, yeah, no, it's all about where you can get to, where you can climb. Like if you think of all the famous speeches by like Reagan and Roosevelt and Truman, it's all about the American dream.
Yeah,
It's what sort of you, not you reap what you sow in so much, but well, I mean it is that, but that's not what they said. They said something along the lines of you make what you will, something along those lines. Like you can get whatever you work hard to achieve, that kind of thing. It's all about
yeah,
you stepping up, getting your head above the crowd, working
yeah,
hard.
of
You reap
course.
the rewards, and it's just and
That
I
is
get
it. Yeah,
that,
it's
I
the
get that,
capitalist
but
idea. Yeah,
it's
agreed that.
just the idea from Scandinavia. It's like, hey guys, let's just get along and make sure we're all happy. That's it. That literally is it. That's sort of the idea of a very mild socialist country, not communism.
Yeah,
Mild socialist is right, cool. We're all doing okay. Let's just make sure everyone's doing all right and we share. And that's just not the
they.
American dream. That's just not the American dream.
Yeah,
The
of
American
course.
dream is
It's
I'm going to get my head above the crowd. I'm going to push
and
my
you don't
elbows
mind
out. I'm going to
treading on
get
a
my way
few
to the
other
top. Yeah,
people
absolutely,
to
absolutely, and
get
that's
together.
okay.
Yeah,
I as
and again,
in
like
I
you
don't
have
hate them
you.
for it. It's just that is
Yeah,
what
of
it is.
course.
It is what it is.
I'm happy to pay my taxes because I also as well, even if you are a selfish person, which to be fair, a lot of people intrinsically are. That isn't the argument. The argument is at the end of the day, that if you are willing to pay your taxes and everyone is willing to pay their taxes, that in fact everyone can benefit from it. A healthier populace by paying into National Health Service is good for everyone. It's good for companies that need to employ people. It's good for when you're walking down the street and there isn't people dying on the side of the road. Um, it's good for education so that kids can work longer and harder and be more proficient at their work by remaining healthier.
Mhm.
It
Mhm.
means that the roads for everyone is better. Again, they can employ more people because they have access to those types of facilities. um, by providing shelter, you get homeless people off the streets. Like there is genuine benefits to all of society by paying into that, social idea. Again, that's the idea of
If I can extend that, if I
socialism.
can
But
extend that, let's say for example, I'm literally going to touch on everything you just said. Let's just say for example, I don't pay taxes. There's no taxes now where in Britain. I get all of my income. Okay, so
yeah,
let's just say that the taxing is perfect, and I not only do I want my taxes to pay for others, but I will directly see the benefit that I pay as well. So, let's just say I go to hospital twice a year, so I receive the medical treatment that I've
yeah,
paid for. I use the amount of roads that I've paid to fix. Um, let's say um, I, I, I didn't get any, I didn't pay any taxes, sorry, so I get all my income, and then I want to expect all of those things. I want all of those rewards, okay? So I want to be able to get that medical treatment, but I'll just pay for it myself this time, okay? But I also want good roads, and I will, I'll pay for it this time. I also want transport, but I'll be paying for this time. It's there's so many variables or so many different resources that a pool of tax money funds, such as healthcare,
yeah.
education system, blah 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 blah. There's so many things that if we took away taxes and everyone spent their money individually, there's no way I could distribute my wealth willingly as a
Of
way to get
course,
those
yeah.
benefits. There's no way. Let's say, for example,
For the time being, though, that's more of a logistics
yeah,
argument.
no,
Potentially,
no, 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 no. But I think it's strong. I think the logistics argument is strong, in that I
of course, at
genuinely,
the moment,
like, I'm
very
22 years old, but eventually I'm gonna want kids. I want them to have a good education system.
yeah,
How do I like start paying for that now some way?
yeah. Well,
Like no, like it's
why
just
don't you?
far easier to continue
Well,
paying my taxes over time. Sorry.
I tell you what, why don't you stop paying taxes, put all of that money into a little pot, pay for like a little nuclear weapon, start putting into funds into your own school, and then go and buy a tarmac layer and go and tarmac all the roads for 400 miles,
Well,
just so you
no,
can.
only the roads I want to be taking in the future.
Yeah, well, that could be a lot though if you wanted to get to the other side of the country.
Yeah, I know, but I mean, I genuinely think logistically, if I kept all my money to myself, how could I
It's impossible.
possibly
At the
redistribute
moment,
that
it's impossible.
willingly to, I guess, prepay for all those things I might need in the future? Like
You
the
know,
amount I would have, like I understand, I could start a college fund, sorry, a university fund. I could start saving for my children's university fees. Well,
of
yeah,
course, yeah.
or what's currently in the UK is you just sort of pay your taxes and people get subsidies when they go.
Yeah. Like
So
we're not
whether
saying that
you're
everything's
yeah, so I
perfect.
know, but I do think logistics is in it. It's far easier
Yeah,
that I
of
just
course.
give the government 200 quid a month, and I have trust that they will invest that I will get the benefit back. I will get that £200 back in some way. That I believe that, and I do
Yeah.
think the logistics argument is strong. But obviously, that's something that's going to change for sure. Like as you pointed out, that it can change. There may be better ways. I could maybe pre-plan my individual tax spending. Let's say,
Yeah.
Will, you have to spend 200 quid on taxes per month, and I could fully customize where that money goes, and
I mean,
something
taxes
no,
are ring fenced a lot of the time anyway,
no,
so
no, no. I'm saying ring fence. Yeah, ring fence is great, but I mean customization.
yeah, of
But
course. I didn't
but I
say
actually I know, but then I could only reap that. So let's say, you know what, I just want to invest in healthcare. That's it. But then I then somehow wasn't allowed
difficulty
to.
is no
No,
one would
no.
pay for the army, would they?
Well, no, but then I wouldn't. I know this is a bad one, but like, let's say it's roads. I never paid for
I
any
get what you're
roads because
pointing
I
at.
like fuck that. And they're like, well, you're not allowed to use a car, sir. Sorry, you don't pay for
At
the
the
maintenance
end
of
of
this road. And
at
you're
the
like,
end of the day,
fuck.
the
And then
best
so
way to
maybe
do
you
it is
have to then.
privatise the areas that can be privatised. That's the best. That is the better way of doing it. That's why I think at the moment roads are going to take a long time to privatise. The army's going to take, probably could well never be
That will
privatised.
never be privatised.
And police forces could well be. At the end of the day, we already see night watches, private security, closed off residences, security cameras. That is a form of privatization in a way. They're taking, whether or not we want to, we are taking steps towards more capitalist routes, and I'm fine with that. But I'm
Yeah,
also
me too. Me
fine
too.
with paying into taxes at the moment because I know that I know that they're needed for the time being, and it doesn't matter what you argue at the end of the day. Also, taxes being needed doesn't necessarily mean that they're not evil. But I mean, come on, you don't even need to look that deep into it.
Well, the
They're
thing is,
just
that's actually a summary
they
point of
protect the vulnerable.
yeah, and that's actually a summary point of my whole thoughts of this video. That this video, to me, Stephen doesn't really question socialism. Is it evil? The redistribution of wealth, is that evil? No, no, no. All Stephen does throughout this entire video is argue taxes are theft.
Yeah,
That is his argument, that taxes are
yeah, of
theft.
course.
And
Can we?
but and
If you
sorry,
finish
sorry.
off
So,
that
so
point,
well, I'll close it very quickly. So that's his argument.
yeah,
Taxes are theft. He doesn't draw in the. He admits that he wants some public funded things such as education, roads, and police, but he doesn't draw that line. So he admits that taxes are theft. He continually even says that phrase, "Taxes are theft." You're taking my money, but then does say that he wants things publicly funded, but then doesn't draw the line. So that's difficult. He says it's theft, but then he does want publicly funded things. He doesn't draw the line whether it is between theft and taxes that he wants. So I think it's reprehensible. Um,
um, I agree.
and I pretty much
And
yeah, I have a couple of points that I want to make on that
we've got to
autism
do the
topic.
Yeah, okay, let's do the autism, and I think we
And
should
well, no,
close
no,
up.
no. Why don't you quickly summarize what you thought of the video? Because I did it, and I think his summary of the video, my summary of the video is taxes theft from Stephen's point of view, and he doesn't draw the line on where he stands, essentially.
Okay, my conclusion to that first debate with that first
Yeah,
interviewee, sorry. I actually thought it was quite a poor debate, just because I thought it wasn't very he didn't have much integrity in his continuation of it. Really,
yeah.
I thought the other guy was a good debater, made some very very strong points that Stephen didn't really contest very well,
He
and
massively
again,
sidestepped. He sidestepped.
yeah,
Yep.
sidestepped a lot of them, and I agree with you. I think his only point that he made, which he didn't fully analyze or develop, was again that you've extrapolated a little bit saying tax and theft, but he said that it was immoral to redistribute income and wealth,
Yep.
which of course that an extension of that definitely is taxes. Um, and I that's I just think it's wrong to make that as an objective statement because, well, if we just, of course, everything we've discussed, but I think it's wrong because he just doesn't provide any evidence to support his claims, really.
Yeah.
That's why. Like, he may have had that fucking booklet, but first of all, he didn't make any other points and he didn't back anything up. All he did was go out to attack him, which is when we get onto the autism thing now. Um, would you mind if I started off and then you
Yep.
developed it?
Go.
So,
Yeah.
just
Absolutely.
to introduce, if you could reference the point later on, the guy claims
Well, actually,
that.
sorry to avoid confusion. Could I introduce it and then let you
Go
go?
on then.
But I have a
Yeah,
very
please.
clear
If you
vision
know
of what
exactly what
happened.
happened.
Yep. Okay.
Go on.
So Stephen was trying to make a point. Joseph countered and said, "No, no, you're being too sort of logical. That it's not as clear cut as that. You're making a really autistic point, or you're being really autistic about this.
No,
It's
he
it,
said it's
it's not that
uh,
clear cut."
like autistic ideology or
Oh
autistic
yeah, no,
statement,
absolutely, yeah, that's fine. I'll
or it's
run
like
with that. Autistic ideology or autistic statement. Um,
yeah,
my
or
interpretation of
autistic.
that is Yusuf is saying you are following logic too closely in saying
Yes,
that this will happen, then this will happen, and this is how you counter. And Yusuf's point was, no, 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 you're being too autistic. Autistic being you follow logic sort of to the letter because you don't
yes,
really conceive that there's anything outside of logic. That's generally what autism is. And he was sort of using it as a descriptive word, saying, Stephen, you're being so logical. You're thinking that
yeah,
everything is clear and cut, but actually that isn't the real world application. You're not being realistic. It's not, black and white. There's grey areas. It's contentious. You can't just follow logic that closely.
yeah. He didn't.
It's
He
not that
didn't.
realistic. And that use of the word autistic, so you're being autistic. You're following logic too
Well,
closely. Is
hold on,
essentially what
hold
it's
on.
saying. And then you
do
go, and then you go. Sorry, so that's
I'd,
what he
I'd like
said.
to
You
I'd
go.
like to clarify that
You go.
slightly. He never once called the guy autistic. He never said you are autistic, or he didn't say you are being autistic, or what.
Okay,
Um,
I would if he did say that,
he
I would defend that still.
described.
If you no, sorry, I just want to say, if you say you are being autistic, that is defensible, and I stand by that. But if you're saying you are autistic, that is a direct insult. It's not okay. Bad use in a discussion. But to describe someone as
Yeah,
being autistic, I'm personally okay with that, if they are
it's
following logic
well.
closely.
At
But
the end
carry
of the
on. I'm
day,
not saying that Yusuf said that.
yes,
You
of
know,
course.
it's
I'd like to. Yeah, I'll
you go.
continue
You go.
again. Like you said, the thing is, he never used autism as an insult. And the funny
No,
thing
no, he
is, the
didn't. You're right.
fact the guy said, the fact that Stephen said, the fact that you've used autism in a form of debate, that is, insulting and offensive. The irony here is he's saying that just because autism, or sorry, the whatever it's called, the suffix of that,
Hmm.
autistic, it is therefore an insult. That the irony there is, like, that is the offensive part, is what Stephen is saying, that whenever you describe someone as autistic, that it is inherently offensive. I'm sorry, no, it's not. It is just a descriptive word. If you describe something as being hard, or okay, well, that's a
I've got a good
poor
comparison. I've
idea,
got a
but
good comparison. Okay, if I
sorry, go
stub
on
my
then.
toe, and then I walk around and I'm sort of hobbling, and they go, "Will um, you're walking like a cripple. Is everything all right?" Am I going to be insulted because he called me a
Yeah,
cripple? No,
exactly.
I'm
It's
not. Oh
like,
no, I've
how fucking dare you call me a cripple type thing?
yeah,
No, 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 no,
no,
no, no. It's
I've
like, at
stubbed
the
my
end of the day,
toe. I'm just hobbling a little
yeah,
bit. That's what I'm saying.
it's a form
You're
of
sorry,
comparison. But
you're being autistic there. It's not that clear cut. It's not
yeah,
realistic when you apply that. It's not black and white. Oh,
I think
okay. I'm
it's
following logic too closely. I think I understand you now.
yeah, of course. It's
You're
so
not. When
it's
you
like
call
all
someone you're
so
being a yeah, yeah. It's just bleh. I hate
autism
it.
is a mental deficiency. Doing something autistic would be described as anything that would follow what a autistic person would do, or the process of doing or performing character, something that has the characteristics of something autistic is
Yeah.
what it is,
And
isn't
do
it?
you know why he's insulted
And
by that? He's insulted because his perception of someone with autism is a
is a
low
negative one.
is negative. It's negative,
Yeah,
and
exactly.
so he
That's
thinks
the
he's being
irony that
yeah
I was
he
trying to
thinks he's
describe.
being described as a lesser human being because he's being described as someone who's
Yeah,
doing autistic
exactly.
things.
And he's now saying this is, like, offensive, insulting. Honestly, it's probably
Well,
the most
he's the only one
dumbest
that thinks
argument
it's
he's made.
negative.
Yeah, exactly. The other guy. So I think would like to clarify what Yusuf, is it Yusuf? Sorry, I
Yeah,
keep
it's Yusef.
forgetting.
It's Yusef.
Is saying is that typically the characteristics of something autistic is that it is closely followed logic. They can't ground anything realistically. They do it more to do with the again. There's only one way of describing that, is like logical, or
Blindly logical. He actually
blindly
he
logical with
tries
no
to
context,
describe it and
or
saying, it wasn't an insult. I said it because
there's
you
no
were.
meaning or understanding.
He
It's
said
just
it
logic.
because Stephen, you're following logic too closely, and then the guy goes, "Oh
Yeah.
my God, you're insulting." Blah, blah, blah. And okay,
So
I
I
defend
don't.
Yusuf. It's an appropriate use of the word. And do you know
Uh,
what's really
uh,
interesting?
it could have been avoided, in all honesty, just to. But I
I
think the
defend it. I
use was
defend it.
fine.
I defend it.
Okay.
I defend it.
Yeah,
Um,
fairs.
but do you know what's really interesting? That if that's okay, and he said you're being rude, that's insulting, or that's blah blah blah. Okay, Stephen reminds him that he did that a
Oh
further
God,
8 times. So if
Yeah,
that's bad and that's bad behaviour for the debate, and he doesn't want it on his show, fine.
why the hell does he
Well,
repeat it?
yeah,
Like,
you call it out, but then you do it back to him eight
I know
times in the
it
interview.
makes no sense. And of course, it was all just after a laugh. But it was like, oh, wouldn't want to be described as being autistic now, would I? I was like, oh, are you being autistic? I can't remember
He
what he
said
said,
he
but
used the word retard as well. He brought that in. He said
it's like,
being called a
yeah,
retard, or no, that's being called a dick or something. It's like, well, okay,
yeah. It's again, it was
you're doing exactly what you told
if
Yusuf not to
I
do.
I think if he wanted to if he had an issue with that word, he should have said, whether it be because he takes offense to it, or he just doesn't like hearing conversation, or again, I think the point he was trying to make was that he wasn't using the word correctly. At the end of the day, it's the English language. I think it is a pretty reasonable way of using it. I haven't seen it used like that very often, which is probably
No,
perhaps one of the reasons
nor have I.
why.
But when I thought about it, I
Um,
was like, damn, that's
yeah,
smart.
yeah, that's a fair point. The guy was clearly very, very well educated, well thought through, and I thought everything he said was quite reasonable and eloquent, actually.
He
Again,
also
I think
wasn't allowed to defend his use of the word. Stephen just continually interrupted him when he said it. Like,
which
I'd love to
was
rewatch it back. He
yeah.
just didn't let him fully defend himself. He used the word. Also, he started off saying, "Oh, I'm doing it because you're following logic too closely, and it's just a bit of banter, isn't it?" And that was
Uh,
not great because he goes,
no,
"Yeah, I
no.
did it for a laugh," and he's like, "Well, come on, Yusuf, not cool."
Yeah,
But but
that's. I
but but
think
but in my
that's
in my
definitely a.
book, well, Stephen used that to get a laugh on Yusuf 8 times further.
Yes. Yeah.
So
Yeah.
you used it as banter
Also,
for
that was
Stephen.
that exactly, yeah. So, but I
Jesus.
think that's a fair point. If he said to him, I don't really like using the word in that way, that's fine. You can say that, and he
Yeah,
could well take that
totally.
criticism on. But to say that first of all, like, is like that it should insult him, I think that's only showing himself up more. Because of course, what the implications of that saying is.
Yeah,
But
he
considering we
perceives
don't
to
have.
be autistic as negative, and so if someone says you're being autistic, then he's being described negatively, and it's like, well, no, you're just being described as someone who's following logic too closely. If
Yeah.
you think
I mean, at the end of the day, if
being
someone
called
called you
autistic is
autistic,
negative, then you've got something wrong, mate. You think being autistic is bad, so that's on you as a person. Like you
like,
perceive
it is.
autistic
It's a
people
difficult one.
below than yourself if you
Yes,
actually get
it's
insulted.
it
If you
goes
get insulted by being
lower.
called autistic, you believe that they are lower than yourself, and you don't want to be lower to their level, and you take
But
offence.
sometimes though, at the end of the day, you wouldn't want to be called autistic. But he never did call him autistic, so that's the thing. Like,
Yeah,
at the end
absolutely.
of the day, if someone walked up to me and called me autistic, I think a lot of people would definitely take offence to that. I think the point that he was making, like,
But
that's a
Yusuf defended it in the
difficult
next
topic.
sentence. He said, "You are following logic too closely." He defended it in the next
Yes.
sentence, but
Yeah.
then he was
Yeah.
interrupted. Yusuf tried to go, well, banter, isn't it? And then he goes, not on my show, mate. And then it continues. So Yusuf should have just said, no, look, you're following logic too closely. I'm going to stand by that word, and it would have been better. But he put banter in there. But I don't mind that he put banter in there because fucking Steven just did it 8 times again, so it doesn't
Yeah.
matter
Yeah.
in my book.
So
Um,
yeah, I think definitely people can take offense to being called autistic, but at the end of the day, like, don't use it as if you're trying to be sensitive and try to knock him down a few pegs by saying your use of this word is offensive to those people, blah 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 blah, or it's insulting to me. I just think it's very poor debating. Just
Yeah,
just just
general
avoid it.
behaviour, leaning
Yeah,
forward, not having a second microphone when you know there's going to be a speaker, tapping the table, putting your hand in front of your speaker, leaning forward, very aggressive, really not great
what?
behaviour. And
Yeah,
one bit to close because I think we can both close that we don't like Stephen's behaviour.
yes,
So I don't think we need to beat the dead horse on that one. Let's move on. Um, is that on a small scale, on small towns, small countries, indigenous towns, more left-leaning socialist policies work in my book, and globally or transnationally, such as a vast country like the US, it doesn't work. And my
it's
analogy
not that it
is,
doesn't work. It's just often it's better to
well,
reduce the level of it.
yes,
Yeah,
okay,
and that's
better to
fair enough.
reduce and to have less distribution and let markets and individuals
Less regulation is what I
less
prefer.
regulation, play with their own resources essentially. And what it is that if something works on a small scale, it doesn't necessarily work on a big scale. When things become vast, the the variables become incalculatable. So if you
Just
have a diff,
economies of scale, really. A lot of the time, if you have a government that's trying to do everything, sometimes it's just inefficient to run it. Meaning,
yeah,
as it
and
gets
I'm going to
bigger, it
touch on
becomes
how.
more
Yep, yep, yep,
inefficient,
yep.
which is fair
Absolutely,
enough.
absolutely, absolutely. And so if you take a glass of water and you put a teaspoon of salt in it, the salt will distribute perfectly evenly, and it's fantastic, brilliant. If you take that cup of water and you make it the size of the ocean, and you put the same amount of salt, not the same amount scaled, so the same ratio of salt to water
Yeah.
parts, are you going to get a perfect distribution of salt? No,
I
you
think
don't.
no fucking
No,
idea.
no, I'll tell you. No, you definitely fucking don't. What you have in our oceans is if you have giant underwater rivers or streams, uh, currents of fresh water. So the ocean
Yeah,
is vastly salt, but you have pockets and flowing rivers of fresh water. Um,
I did not know
because
that.
of sort of the direction of the tides, the moon's continual
Yeah,
influence and pulling of the water, the vast temperature differences between, say, the Southern Ocean, which is obviously
that
really
makes
cold,
sense.
the Indian, which is very
It's
warm.
uncontrollable
There's
because of
so many more variables than your silly glass of water that your distribution of salt is not even. You have this rich vein running through of fresh water that flows because it's not
in this
mixing, and
case
it's
a
just,
poor vein.
yeah. I mean, it's
Sorry,
just,
that was a terrible pun, but
no,
carry on.
it's fine. It's just that there's, on a vast scale, just the variations or
Agreed.
the dynamics. They're just so incalculatable, and difficult to control. You don't get that perfect
You
spread
need
that you did on the
market
small scale.
forces.
Yeah, absolutely. So you did, the village works, the town works. In a village, there's one guy that grows all the food, and he can distribute that perfectly. There's one guy who goes off twice a week to the big city to become a doctor, and he can cure people in a doctor. There's another guy that does the wood cutting. There's another guy that sort of builds the houses, and it works. And you can just sort of share the food, you can share the wood, and it's great.
Of
They
course.
can be very social. But then a fucking massive country where each of you got different types of food, each of you got different types of wood, different types of healthcare, and you're just like, yo, let's like pool and share and redistribute all of this so
Yeah,
everything's
it's about
equal.
giving
It's just,
responsibility back to the individual when they've got the infrastructure to support it. When you're in a small
yeah,
town
but
where you
what I'm
don't
trying to
have
saying is
that, it's like,
it was bigger, when it's bigger than that small
yeah, of
town,
course. Yeah, that's what I mean.
you
Like,
just can't have that enforced
yes, no, I agree.
redistribution, not distribution, redistribution. You can't have the enforced redistribution.
I
It just
think we're
doesn't
at an
work.
hour, William.
Yes, I believe we are.
Um, but yeah, I guess that's the first debate. We'll probably be doing another one next week or
Yeah,
something
I'd
like
like
that.
to. I'd definitely like to. I'm just gonna beat the dead horse and run over what I think I said.
Oh no,
I
no,
think,
we've done it. We've
really,
already done it.
okay.
Yeah, I'd
Humans'
say I
behaviour
think we've done
sucks.
a good job.
I'm
Yeah,
very right leaning, to be perfectly honest with you, but
he does a poor job of defending
he
his
does.
point.
An amount of redistribution is required in my book, um, and so I can understand how socialism works for small indigenous homogenous countries, but it will never work on a large global scale. IMO, IMO,
Yeah.
IMO.
Okay, I think we'll call it a day there.
Call it a
If
day. You sure?
yeah.
I mean, you sure? I mean, there's. I can re-go over for a 15th time.
No, I think we'll leave it there.
All right. 3, 2, 1, and we're off.